We need to answer the question if it is time to sell one of the Shmeemobiles, one of the cars from here in my collection. Hi guys, I'm Shmee, hello, and welcome back to the channel where behind me we have a fair few of my cars, of course, plenty that aren't mine, and we're not going to be talking about one of those. But considering things on the future horizon, things that are going to be arriving, there's something that might need to depart. Now, we said farewell to a few cars over the last year. We've had plenty of others that have joined the Shmeemobiles, but there is one in particular that I want to talk about today. There are some, like the Ford GT, that I have said I will never ever sell, but we did recently see two, I think, fairly iconic Shmeemobiles depart from the collection. First up was the Lamborghini Huracan STO, the bright viola bast. It's had a few different looks over the years. A car that I actually owned for over 2 years, had a whole lot of fun with, but it was time to move it on. We've welcomed in its place a temporary Lamborghini from my friend Richard at Challenge the Road, the Murcielago LP670 SV, which is stunning, but we also said goodbye to the McLaren Senna. And I know that was one of the most well-known Shmeemobiles, but I never really referenced it as a car that I was going to keep forever. I owned it for over 5 years. I can't believe how quickly that 5 years flew by. Technically, it left from the garage before the Lambo, but it was still in my possession until only a couple of months ago, and then it is, of course, headed towards a new owner. But yeah, something else. I did recently tease an upcoming arrival to the Shmuseum, something that would be the biggest Shmeemobile ever. Except there's a hitch in that plan, and it might not be going exactly as I intended. So you'll have to watch this space for that one. I will give you news when we have news. In its place, however, I can tease something else. One of the smallest Shmeemobiles ever might be an imminent arrival. Not quite as small as my old classic Mini, the Shmini, because that was tiny, but something that you definitely will not be expecting. Something that's going to be joining the garage that is new to me, albeit not new, in many different ways, but that's not the topic of today's video. Let's get to which car might be being sold. In addition to that little tease, little quite literally, but I'm not going to be giving you any more clues right now. You'll have to wait for that. There are two other cars for the future that I have announced already. There are at least 3, maybe 4 more future Shmeemobiles that you're going to have to wait for. I can't announce things too soon. Things change, as we've just established with the biggest one. However, there are a couple of Ferraris inbound. So over here, at the Ferrari side of the collection right now, you know already the Roma Spider is coming, I suspect later this year, towards the end of 2024. You also know the SF90 XX Stradale is going to be joining the collection probably in early 2025. So that begs the question, what happens next with my SF90 Stradale? I've owned this car for about 2 years now, but to talk a bit more about it and what I'm thinking at the moment, let me get this unplugged, pull it on out, and we'll dive a little bit more into this. It's actually funny to think, I bought this car this week 2 years ago, talking about 5 years for the Senna. I can't believe that it's been 2 years since I bought this already. It auto-locks, hence the beep. But I originally purchased it from HRO and Ferrari here in London. It went to Topaz Detailing for paint protection film, and then it went to Italy for the first drive from Enzo Ferrari's house inside Pista di Fiorano in Maranello. The adventure began with this in Italy before heading all the way up through Germany. In fact, we went all the way north to Denmark to visit Lego House in Billund, all part of the launch of the Lego Technic Ferrari Daytona SP3, before then heading onwards to the Easter weekend at the Nürburgring Nordschleife, driving some laps with the SF90 Stradale. But you know what? Since then, it's done so much more. Over the 2 years, I've driven it about 9,000 miles in total, which for one of these is a lot of miles, but it's a fantastic car to do it in. Now, a year ago, again this month, 12 months ago, we stuck the ski box on the roof to take it on a road trip down towards the ice in St. Moritz. In fact, we also went to the global media drive of the Ferrari Purosangue in the same location that we took my car back to only a couple of months ago to go revisit, drive the same roads. But this is a car that is very much me in a car. It's about technology, it's about performance, it's also about an elegant specification, and I love the spec that I chose, the blue Electrico over the dual tone interior. So if I were to be saying goodbye to it, it would be one that I would be a little bit sad about, even though its successor, the XX, is the inbound replacement. There's so much more to it though, so I want to get this out today to go and discuss a bit more as well, something I touched on recently, having the 296 GTS also in the garage alongside this, and the future plans I have in my mind, being a Ferrari collector, the different models, where it's all headed, and what I think is going to be happening down the line. Before we go anywhere, this car, this is my friend's SF90 Assetto Fiorano, the Fiorano package, which gives you the Multimatic dampers, it gives you the carbon fiber door cards, the carbon fiber seats, more carbon all around in fact, and with the optional painted livery. And I want to mention this because the silver stripe here with the yellow detailing is part of it. You can spec this in many different ways, but I particularly like this shaping, and it's something I'm looking at playing with on the XX in the configurator. So my friend's car's basically just been staying here for a short while. It's quite fun to have the two SF90s together. I'm yet to drive this one, but I have driven an AF before, and the differences are very interesting because this, with the more focused dynamic dampers from Multimatic, means that you can't have the lift system that we have in mine. And on the XX, you effectively get a setup like that as standard, and then the option is to install the adaptive suspension, which gives you the optional lift system, which is probably something I'm going to need. So it's quite interesting how different the same car can be, but I never went for the AF originally because I knew, or I had a pretty good idea, that a Versione Speciale, the VS as they're nicknamed, would come out of this car, which of course it has now done, and which of course this might be being replaced by in the future. Anyway, let's hop in and let's get out. Well, the sun is out today. I know, it's remarkable here in the UK, but it does mean that the roads are certainly a little bit busier than normal. Not entirely sure about that overtake there, sir. I had to slow down for that one. Anyway, the thing with this car that I've said so many times is that to drive, it is an absolute delight. Press it into performance mode, start dropping some gears, the noise of the V8 and the absolutely bonkers amount of power. When you accelerate, and I mean this is just a gentle drive at the moment, it's seriously quick, like terrifyingly quick. But on the other hand, when you go into automatic, flick it back into auto, when you pop it back into, even into e-drive, right, you've got about 15 miles of electric driving. And for me, actually, to go from the barn to home and back to the barn, I can do that on full electric. So it's quite a weird thing to take a Ferrari and to not even start the engine if I take it home. I want to talk in a bit about some of the comparisons the opposite way round of the 296 to this, which I did a little bit when I was driving the 296 about 2 months ago, because they are quite different cars, and that's the thing that's really hard to understand, because on the face of it, they're both hybrid Ferraris, right? They're both supercars that have electrical assistance. We'll talk more about that in a moment. It is very busy around here. I suspect there is an event going on, maybe even a wedding or something at the church here. Anyway, we will try and make our way through past all of this, and like I say, electric, accelerate. It's super comfortable, so you can pop it into bumpy road mode. So let's say you've got the engine running, or you're in hybrid, or let's just have the V8 on actually. Obviously we're in sport mode, you can go up into race or keep it in sport for the road, pop it back into bumpy road, and it's just a really nice car to drive. It's a really nice car to drive. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but the different things that I've done with this, whether it's been long distance motorway cruises, where it's a lot of fun, or whether it's been really dialing it up and, you know, pushing it around the Nürburgring, it's a car that is definitely road focused, but ticks a lot of boxes. It does everything really very, very well. And on the other hand, like I say, go into manual, pop it into race, start dropping down some gears, and it's easy to underestimate the character of this 4-litre twin-turbo V8. Because what I liked so much from day one with the SF90 is that it really engineered fun in the mid-range, kind of in the same way the 675 LT does, but in the way that the F8, 488, and those other V8 Ferraris often don't. Even the Pista, you have to really be revving it up to get the most out of it. Cancel. It hears me saying the brand name, and it brings up the automatic voice recognition, which I don't think you can turn off. But here, I mean, just through the country roads, I can tell it's...
There is no media available.
don't know what it's talking about. It's a little bit slippy, it's still fairly cold, and we're on cup 2s that aren't up to temperature yet. But you find the way it recharges the battery in the background really very clever. It just happens. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to think about it. You just choose your mode. I know a lot of people pop it straight into qualifying mode, which is maximum 1,000 horsepower. If you're down in performance, you have something like 70 less. Most people will pop it in qualifying mode and off they go, which is not the most purposeful way of doing it. Obviously, if you're on the racetrack, yes, because you're going to have maximum power and maximum regeneration. But for normal road driving, not the logical way to go about it. Oh, someone came flying through there, through the little village. The traffic today for these kind of country lanes is pretty busy. Back out on open roads. This thing is a little bit edgy, and I know because it's not screaming ridiculously loudly, even like the 296 does, it doesn't necessarily seem as fast as it is, but believe me, when you put your foot down and accelerate in the SF90 Stradale, ooh, nice crack out of it there. This thing is ballistic. It is literally a ballistic missile. It is so quick, edgy, and just has you on the edge of the seat that you don't really know what to do with yourself. Concentration is definitely needing to be on the road, on what you're doing. Talking of which, let's compare for a moment the 296 and the SF90, because when I drove the 296 on exactly this road, I concluded that it was the better car for this kind of driving. But I was chatting recently with some friends, and we came up with a bit of an analogy for these two cars, which I've never heard anybody reference, but I think sums it up really quite well in a way that's a bit more relatable to people who can't figure the differences between the 296 and the SF90. Consider it like the 296 being the equivalent of a C63 of previous generations, and the SF90 being somewhere between the E63 and the S63. This is the bigger one. This is the, yes, heavier, more luxurious, more premium feeling, still very fun, incredibly powerful, but less boisterous, playful, maybe characterful version. You know, the 296 sounds more obnoxious than the SF90 does in the same way the C63 does. This is more of a luxurious feel with immense power, even though the performance is actually pretty similar in many different environments, many racetrack type driving environments, or even drag strips or whatever it might be. And this feels like the more grown up car. And I think that C63 to E63 S63 analogy is a great way to picture that in some more normal terms that perhaps makes a little bit more sense of it. This is a bigger car, it's longer, it's also got more electric motors because it has two up front. It's got 3 in total as opposed to just the one for the rear axle in the 296. Road opens. Oh my gosh, you get towards the red line in here and it is just a little bit terrifying, genuinely terrifying. As we come up towards some pretty narrow country lanes, he was borrowing our side of the lane there, and that's where it gets quite scary when you're driving something like this. There used to be trees all the way along the left side here, so that's definitely changed a bit in recent times. But this is the kind of road where it's really interesting, because if you drive this in, say, my STO when I had it, the ride comfort was atrocious. The bumps down here that we have on a B road here in England, just not fun in a car that's fully track focused. And that's one of the things about this for me is, even though it's 1,000 horsepower, it's still my like road supercar. Combination of this and the 296, I just enjoy driving them in this kind of environment. Even here I'm feeling it squirming around a little bit. We need more temperature in the Cup 2s, and it feels very wide up this road, very wide, as we come towards a bit more of a town section. Even the downshifts, those swooshes you get, the different sounds from it, there's so much going on. It tells me on the dash that the service time is due, second year service of course. The first time I drove one of these was in Italy, on the country roads around Maranello, before getting to stretch the legs at Pista di Fiorano. And what an experience it was. I was well and truly sold on the concept. So what's next? The SF90 XX. Before that though, into eDrive to crawl through town, and I really enjoy it. I'm sorry to say, because as a petrol head I suppose we're being quickly programmed to hate electric, But the reality is, electric isn't all bad. A time like this, when you go out onto the lanes and you floor it and have some fun, and then you come into town, into a village, and you can just silently crawl through, or like I say, to drive into my garage late at night, because I'm often at my office desk until sometimes really quite late. So when I get back home, the last thing I want is to have driven home in a noisy supercar where my neighbours are going to very quickly hate me. So there are big advantages, but those come primarily in a hybrid, where you're not fully dependent on the electric car charging infrastructure, on finding a fast charger somewhere, and being stranded in the middle of nowhere. So I'm a big advocate for hybrids when performance is the main aim of the game. Things like the LaFerrari P1918 generation, which we now see in the SF90, the 296, and a plethora of other cars out there, obviously on the market, and things that will come in the future. What I think is going to be really interesting, actually, talking about the brands I just mentioned, is that we are soon to see the introduction of the LaFerrari successor, the P1 successor, and the 918 successor. And two of the three, I believe, are going to be hybrids, and one of the three is going to be fully electric. And what is that actually going to mean for the market? What are people going to think? What are people going to want to buy? Which is going to be the strongest and most in demand? Which was even a funny one back when the previous Holy Trinity of the hybrid hypercars was introduced, as to where demands initially were. Obviously V12 and two V8s at that time. I suspect if I was a betting man, the next round will be two V6 hybrids and the Porsche Mission X that will become a full electric. Obviously Porsche having an ownership of Rimacs means I wouldn't be surprised to see some of that technology in the Mission X road car when that arrives, whereas both Ferrari and McLaren will most likely take the engines from the 296 and the Artura respectively to develop something crazy for their X cars. I don't know this, I have no information, I'm just going with speculation, spy shots and rumours at the moment, so it might well all turn out to be quite different. But I guess when you're driving like this and surrounded by a ton of cars and traffic, it's just nice, it's just quite peaceful, it's just quite easy going, right? It's just smooth, and this is where the ride quality in this is actually great. The comfort seats are great, and I didn't spec the carbon buckets because I knew in the real world this was more of the kind of driving that I would end up doing. This was going to be more likely to be the environment this car would spend its time, with the idea that the XX would come down the line. As the road is about to open up, let's go for qualifying mode. We are still in manual. Let's drop down some gears. Nobody around me, absolutely anywhere. Second gear, and this thing it's just a bit frantic, it's a bit silly, and that's even with the four-wheel drive system. Like I said, if we were on some smoother tarmac and out on the track and had some more heat in the tyres, it would be less of a concern. But what happens when you take this car and you give it a small extra bit of power, 30 horsepower more in the XX, but crucially a ton more downforce aero, and make it a limited edition Ferrari? And the XX is my first ever limited series Ferrari, which, if I can say so, is a pretty special and exciting thing. To be lucky enough to become one of the owners of only 799 Stradales. There are also the 599 SF90 XX Spiders. It's a very small number. It's less than the number of 812 Competiziones. It's a tiny, rare production run. So to be lucky enough to secure one is crazy and very, very exciting. In terms of specification for it, I will give you guys a full rundown when I've locked it in and absolutely confirmed what I'm going for. Expect it to be different to my original idea. My original idea was actually to go with Giallo Tripostrato. It's a colour I absolutely love. I've seen it on many different cars over the years. Pearlescent metallic yellow, very similar to the GT Black series. I think it looks stunning. But I decided that even though it would look amazing, and I'd shown it when I was at the Atelier back in December and announced the XX was coming, even though it suits it really well, it's a very well-known, famous Ferrari colour. For sure, out of those 1,400 cars, cancel. There we go. Out of those 1,400 cars, you can guarantee that 50 to 100 of them will be in Giallo Tripostrato. And that doesn't fit with what I like to do with the specification of a car. I like to create something that's a bit more unique. Okay, not the only one in the world, but with a twist to it as well. Something that isn't very common, something that feels very personal to me, especially on a car like this, because I mean, at the end of the day, I'm going to be keeping it for a very long time, right? It's going to be potentially a permanent Shmeemobile as my first limited Ferrari. So I want to make sure that I do something that really gives credit to the car and makes something quite special and quite personal. That's the goal with it. So Giallo Triple Strato wouldn't tick that box. As a result, I hope you're going to like what I'm going to show you eventually, but you'll have to wait and see exactly what that's going to be, because I need to lock it in first and go through all of the details and make sure I'm not going to be changing my mind at some point last minute on the topic of that car. However, the XX is coming, and although it's quite a different machine to this in the sense that it is very much for the track, I mean, it is at the end of the day a road car, but it's a road car with track ethos. So I'm not expecting it to be as hardcore as the STO or the Senna. I'm expecting it to ride still as a nice road car, because Ferrari do a very good job of that. They offer 296 challenge cars, GT3 cars, FXXK, and you know, there'll be a future derivative of that as well based on the F250. So they offer track cars if you want a track car, and if you want a road car, well then you can enjoy driving the more focused road car. So does it leave a spot for this in the garage? Does it leave a spot to keep what is a very hefty price tag car that probably at that stage becomes a little bit redundant? Now, don't get me wrong, this has been in the back of my mind for a long time. I have no idea. In a dream world, I would love to keep this, but instead of this, perhaps I could buy the replacement to the 812, which I know I would love as well, and then have the XX, the 296, the Puro Sangue, and the 812 successor, and the Roma Spider. That sounds like a mega Ferrari garage. Or even start looking backwards a little bit. I'd love a 458 Italia. I have a bit of a desire for some reason for an F430 Spider, which was the first car I ever actually test drove from a Ferrari dealer, an F430 Spider with the F1 paddles. That would be a lovely thing also. There are plenty of other cars that are like on my mind. What about a 599? The prices of those are coming down. In fact, my friend JM just did a great video about Ferraris that you can buy for less, as he put it, than a base option-free 911 Carrera, and it's fascinating what you can get. Some really good cars. I mean, a 360, for example, 50-60 grand for a pretty tidy 360, go up to 70 and you're getting a really nice example. So that's on my mind as well, especially if I wouldn't necessarily drive this. And that road car thrill, I think, has been taken by the 296 for the time being, and obviously knowing that the Roma Spider is coming also, because that's going to be wonderful in that type of environment. So I know I'm waffling on about this a fair bit, but I think probably I'm preparing myself for saying goodbye to this early next year when the XX is here. Maybe they overlap for a period, I don't entirely know. That obviously is going to be a decision to make at the time. Part of me thinks it would be really cool to have both side by side for a little bit, but decision to be made, and not a decision to be made overnight, one to think about, one to decide about, because it's quite hard to buy back cars when you've sold them if you want the exact one again. I got lucky with the V8 Vantage Roadster. Nothing to say I would necessarily get lucky again with this in the future if I wanted to hunt it down again. This is still a pinch moment. To be driving a Ferrari like this on a day like this is just absolutely crazy. Beautiful sunshine now, lovely winter's day, always the best. In fact, twin turbo engine, winter's day, technically even better than a hot, warm, sunny day. More cold air for the engine, obviously a little bit more power. And in this case, just experiencing this thing. Lucky to own a car like this, in fact multiple cars like this, is still very much something that my brain has to compute on a regular basis and work out. But as we go up the hill, you know, you put your foot down. It's actually violent enough to almost make some rattles from my phone mount up on the dashboard, which is kind of funny. Anyway, I think we should cruise on. I just enjoy driving it. What can I say? I just enjoy driving this car. Pop it back into hybrid, back into sport mode, back into bumpy road, automatic, cruise away. Yes, that's a lot of settings, I know, but when you're used to it, it's all pretty easy. It's all very self-explanatory. It just works. I quite like all of the I'm going to call them fiddly touch controls on the steering wheel, because I know a lot of people don't like what this brand has done with that, but to me it all works really quite well. And on the Pura Sangue it's got even better with the slightly new shape and the cutouts for some of the buttons and switches so that you can find them more easily. Ultimately, driving quite a few different cars that have the same controls, you also get more familiar with it. Big difference between this and the 296, you possibly just noticed, is that when you put your foot back on the throttle in here, the engine kicks in like this. It's just in and away you go. In the 296, there is a pause, there is a wait for the V6 to start. It's not instantaneous like this. So it makes this a more, I'm going to say, pleasant hybrid experience. In the 296, I'm more likely to press it into performance on the steering wheel and keep it in performance, rather than like this, where hybrid often is perfect for the occasion. So I apologise for the low sun over there that's probably been blinding you through the whole of this video, but it's been a fun drive. So let's continue from here. And we are back, but even on a day like today, when the sun is out in force, it still gets a car like this absolutely filthy, driving down the country lanes. But don't get me wrong, it's part of what they're for. Just the funny thing is when we're trying to arrange logistics over car washing, basically keeping a list, keeping tabs on what in here needs a clean, because I always say this, I try and keep cars fully fueled, cleaned and tidy, charged, ready to go, so that I can literally jump in anything and say, it's time to go drive, we take it out, we're going to have some fun. So that means after a run, this needs things like a tidy up, things that you might not necessarily think about, like even cleaning off the smears that you get on glass from mounting cameras on them. So we always try and clean all of those. And obviously, I didn't do enough driving today to need to fuel it up. It's basically still full, so we'll leave it at that. Because one of the things with this is being a hybrid, you just plug it in, charge it up, and it makes it really efficient. In my normal, let's say, day-to-day driving, I would literally get infinite MPG taking this out. If it's just short runs, you're not running the engine pretty much ever, which is a kind of funny thing to think about when it comes to a 1,000 horsepower supercar that still has a V8. But obviously, if you want to hear the V8, you're going to start using it. I'd love to do a comparison actually between this and the V6. I think that would be quite interesting just to compare them. I think this is a fantastic looking car. And if I can say so myself, the spec of it, and we didn't really talk about the spec inside yet, is really nice. The dual tone that we did in here, Sabia with the blue sterling leather for the upper dash and the steering wheel and those kinds of things, and the matching stitching and embroideries, etc., I think looks super smart. And when the time comes, I will be very sorry to see it go, because this was my first ever brand new Ferrari. But reality hits, and I'm incredibly lucky to have this garage and the cars that are here, but I'm not in a position that I can keep every single car. So obviously a part of the Senna leaving is actually to do with the Zenvo arriving. That was a little bit staggered. It was awesome to have the two together for a while, but the Senna ultimately had to leave to allow funds to have been put towards the Zenvo. And when the XX arrives, something bigger has to go, because I can't keep every single car that's here. I can't keep them all down the line. And I like changing it up. I like new cars. I want to build a Ferrari collection. We've got quite a Ford collection going on, so we've got a bit of Ford versus Ferrari happening here, but it does mean that we'll have to chop and change a little bit, and it will probably mean that down the line, this will find a new home. I'm not about to sell it. It's not going to be going anywhere in the next 3 months, maybe even 6 months, but I would imagine by next year, in 12 months' time, it's probably going to have moved onwards to a new home. That's the kind of idea I have with it in my mind, which is crazy to think. I'll have owned it at that point for 3 years. Those 3 years have flown by, but done plenty of miles in the meantime, and that's what it's about. Enjoying the car, driving the car, experiencing the car, understanding what it's all about, sharing that, of course, with you guys, but ultimately trying something new, moving to the next. So that is the plan on the agenda with the SF90 Stradale. So thank you very much for coming along with me today for the drive out in this wonderful machine. For now, I need to pop it back under the lift, get it plugged in, and go and have a rest, because as you can probably tell, very tired, bit exhausted, not feeling 100%, and need to go and catch a breather. So that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheers.